So we just had the NBA draft take place last week, so I wanted to catch you guys up on some of the player changes that I made before the draft, as well as some of the new players that I've added since the draft happened last Tuesday. This video is again about my draft class, not about my offseason roster, but the information will still pertain to the rookies contained in my offseason roster. As a reminder, my content can be found if you're on Xbox Series or PlayStation 5 consoles. Just search for my YouTube name when you get the option to choose a user-created draft class or a user-created roster if you're interested in the off-season roster rather than the draft class. So jumping right into things, I've actually added 10 new players since May's update, and that actually puts me at over 60 players in this draft class. So you should be able to do a full draft of 30 teams with at least one player left over from this point forward. The 10 players that I added are Dillon Mitchell, Isaiah Nelson, Jacoby Gillespie, Jack Cale, Sergio De La Rea, Maliq Brown, Tyler Bilodeau, Nick Martinelli, Felix Okpara, and Tobi Lawal. For most of these players, I have write-ups about them as a prospect and my opinions on them. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you can get the latest with the draft class and more recently the offseason roster. The one player I did want to call out of that group is Tobi Lawal. He's actually the first player I've given a gold badge to in the draft class. If you don't know Tobi Lawal, he had the second highest vertical jump ever recorded at the combine since the year 2000, and he just is an amazing vertical athlete. It's very easy for him to catch lobs. He's one of the best dunkers I've ever seen out of a draft prospect, so I felt that he deserved that gold aerial wizard. Okay, so quickly, one last call out for the new players in the draft class. Maliq Brown now has the highest steal rating in the draft class at 96. He leads this draft class in steal percentage, and you might be wondering, how could a center possibly have the highest steal rating in this draft class? Well, it's because Maliq Brown is absolutely elite at tracking the ball, swiping down, and getting deflections. I'm going to show you guys one possession from their game against Kansas where he deflects the ball like 3 separate times from 2 different players, but then at the end he picks up a foul and gives up the and one. So this is the epitome of a Maliq Brown possession. He's really good at getting these steals, but he does have a very high foul rate. Transitioning to the next topic, I actually wanted to catch everyone up here on the expected value landscape of my draft class. So I'm going to touch on the top 35 expected value players in my draft class. If you haven't seen my draft class explained video, expected value is essentially on average what overall value does this player peak at. And sorting these expected values gives you a very raw draft board in a sense. It just doesn't acknowledge player ages or player health history or like play style of a given player. So you can see on screen the top 35 that I finished at before the draft actually happened on Tuesday the 23rd. I actually think it turned out pretty well. Obviously you have certain exceptions like Jaden Quaintance. Given his injury history, that's the reason he fell. Otherwise, I think he had top 10 talent. Koa Pete, it was more of a play style thing as to why he dropped. And Henry Vassar, I think, was the biggest shocker that dropped super far into the second round. So I'm still okay with having Henry Vassar ranked where I had him ranked. So now that we've covered expected values of the prospects in my draft class, the next thing I wanted to touch on quickly was hot zones. So if you've been paying attention to the content on my channel recently, I have been uploading some shorts of player clips of them shooting in their hot zones that I've designated. And if you've watched the videos, you know I've done some statistical research on the shot location data for those players to actually determine those hot zones. So just wanted to add some additional commentary around hot zones since they are now featured in the draft class. So number one, not all players have a hot zone or have a cold zone. Some players are completely neutral. Number two, I would generally say that hot zone volume is low just because shot volumes in college are fairly low. Players only play typically 30 to 35 or 40 games maximum in college. And given that there's 14 different shot locations that define hot zones in NBA 2K, the volume just isn't going to be enough to differentiate effectiveness from these different zones. And then the last point I just wanted to make, I have applied all of the hot zones that I have in my data to each of the players that have hot zones in the game. So I don't have any more hot zones left to apply in game, and that is applicable whether I have a video released about the players' hot zones or not. So thank you all for your patience. I know it's been a long time coming adding hot zones. It's been a process on my end as well. So yeah, appreciate your patience, but I think this is going to be a big differentiator between my rookies and a lot of what you see from other people's. And the next topic I wanted to discuss is just attribute refinement and what I've been doing to refine attributes in the draft class since May. And yes, part of me is using refinement because I want to make a severance joke, but really what I'm doing with attribute refinement is trying to make the attributes in game reflect real life as much as possible, and also where it's appropriate that they reflect my opinions of the draft prospects as much as possible. And the easiest way to see that in this draft class is just to sort by different attributes. Obviously, you have some very objective attributes like free throw. I think every player's free throw rating should be reflective of their free throw percentage in real life. I think that's very cut and dry. It should be a bare minimum for any draft class or player creations that you see. So on my end, I just wanted to make sure that in particular, the layup rating and the ball handling ratings were reflective of what's happening in real life, and again, my opinions as well. And I just felt they needed a small refresh in certain instances. So taking a look at finishing numbers and reflecting on the season, I'm gonna put on screen a lot of the changes that I made to players and their layup ratings. Again, if you wanna see who the best finishers are in the draft class, just go ahead and sort by the layup rating in the draft class. But the player I really wanted to talk about is Bennett Sturts. And Bennett Sturts is someone who's not come off as being a particularly athletic guy or a high-level finisher, but he really did finish really effectively this year. And I wanted to make sure that was reflected in the draft class. He has the second highest layup rating in the draft class because he finished at over 70% at the rim. And this is not on low volume. This was at over 125 attempts at the rim this year. That was an even better effectiveness at the rim than Dylan Harper had at Rutgers. So this is not just an anomaly. Bennett Sturts is a fantastic finisher at the rim, and I wanted to make sure that that was reflected again in game. The next attribute I really looked at to refine was that ball handling attribute, and this one is a lot more subjective. Anybody can have their opinions on how good a ball handler is. There is no metric for ball handling, right? So my opinion is that Labaron Philon and his differentiating trait amongst the other guards in this class is that he is the best ball handler in this draft class. So I made sure that he had the highest ball handling rating, and that put him at 89 for his ball handle rating, and I also gave him the silver ankle assassin badge. Other players who I also think are really strong ball handlers who could be in that conversation are Mikel Brown and Darius Acuff specifically. They are above 86, which is like my threshold line for point guard ball handling ratings. So I feel like those are differentiating skills between those guards and the rest as well, but not quite to the degree of Labaron Philon. And then last but not least, you'll also see this in the hands attribute. This one is another very subjective rating, but again, I wanted my opinions to be reflected in this draft class. So for me, the player with the best hands in this draft class is Allen Graves. The player I think who has the second best hands is Hannes Steinbach, followed by Cameron Boozer, and then other players like Maliq Brown, Duke Miles, also all have great hands, whether on offense or defense. So again, you'll kind of see here, if you sort by that hands rating, anybody above that like 90 threshold, I'm kind of picking and choosing and slotting players based on who is a differentiator in that particular attribute. Last thing before we get into individual players and their changes, I may make changes to players during Summer League and during the offseason. It's not likely to happen. I would only make a change if I see something that significantly deviates from my perception of the player right now. So this would include hairstyle changes potentially, or if I see somebody like Keaton Wagler start dunking the ball out of nowhere in Summer League, then I would consider an attribute change to someone like Keaton Wagler. So the first place I'm going to start is with the guy who went number 1 overall, Dybantsa. Again, these aren't major changes that I put in place. These are just micro adjustments that I made. In AJ's case, the biggest change I made was to his finishing. I reduced his dunk by 1. I removed physical finisher silver and dropped that down to bronze. And his layup I also dropped down to 83, which is still very good and 3rd in the draft class, as a matter of fact. For Cameron Boozer, I made some changes to his post offense. I kept his post control at 80 because obviously he is very good when he gets post position. However, I did take away some of his attributes when it comes to his traditional post scoring moves. So Cameron Boozer is not a heavy post hook shooter, and he doesn't shoot a lot of post fadeaways. So I just wanted to make sure that that is reflected in his player profile, because that's not really a big component of his game. He largely shoots layups around the rim. I also removed the strong handle badge and reduced his standing dunk by 5. Darryn Peterson was also impacted by these finishing changes that I made across the draft class. Darryn wasn't a great finisher this year at Kansas. To what degree the injuries played a role is a question, but still the finishing numbers were the finishing numbers. So for Darryn, I removed physical finisher from his badges. I also reduced his layup down to just 76 from 78. I also felt like I needed to compromise between the college version of Darryn Peterson and high school version of Darryn Peterson in terms of end-to-end speed and quickness. So high school Darryn, I would have definitely had silver lightning launch on, but I think after what we saw at Kansas this year, I felt pressure to change that down to bronze. So if he proves me otherwise during something like Summer League, I think there's a very good chance that he could earn that silver badge back. It's more of a wait and see for me. In line with that, I also reduced his agility rating down to 86. I did bump up his set shot specialist to silver. I re-listened to Derek Parker's breakdown of Darryn Peterson's game. I believe he said that Darryn shot 53% on catch and shoot threes, which is a fantastic percentage, especially considering Darren's volume. So for me, that inclined me to bump his rating up to silver for the set shot specialist badge. Darius Acuff is a player I made a lot of small changes to as well. For me, he's the second best ball handler in this class, so I have him at 88 behind Labaron Philon. I also wanted to make sure that his defensive ratings were reflective of how he played at Arkansas this year, which was not very good, to be honest with you. So you'll see a lot of these decreases that I made to Acuff are on the defensive end. I did, however, also offset that with some badges to add to his badge palette, and he actually has the most badges in the draft class. So I ended up giving him Mini Marksman at silver. I gave him the Shifty Shooter badge as well. That one was probably long overdue, to be honest with you. So really just catching up on what his offensive skill set was and what he takes advantage of in his scoring profile, which is, in his case, a great isolation scorer. Similarly, for Labaron Philon, he is somebody whose defense I had to decrease as well, just based on what he showed at Alabama this year. His freshman year, he was a much better defender in terms of effort and productivity. Unfortunately, we didn't see that this year, so I had to compromise some of those ratings, add a happy medium between those two. I think he's the best ball handler in this draft class, so I mentioned earlier, but his ankle assassin is at silver, and he has an 89 ball handling, which is top of the class. He was one of the beneficiaries, actually, of the layup revisions that I made in the draft class, and he's one of the better finishers, as you see, in this draft, and I have him at an 81 layup. For Mikel Brown, I think he's the most explosive athlete of the point guard prospects at the top of the draft, so I really wanted to make sure there were a couple of things that differentiated him between him and a couple of other players in the draft class. So I bumped his dunk rating up to 78. The next closest player is 75. So I think Mikel Brown is a better dunker than Kingston Flemings, for example, who is at 75. I also wanted to catch up on him as a defensive prospect. I still think I had him a little bit lower than what he showed at Louisville this year. I actually think his effort and ability was much better than he showed in his high school film. So I wanted to give him the proper credit. He was not, in my opinion, the worst defensive point guard in this draft class like I originally had him. This is another guy who finished really well at the rim. This was a weakness that people pointed to coming out of high school, but he actually showed that this was a strength for him. He was a really good finisher at the rim at Louisville, and now he has an 80 layup rating in the draft class. So these are just a few of the player changes that I made. There are a lot more, but I did not want this video to drag on any longer than it needed to. So I feel like at this point, you guys have a good sense of the level of detail that I go to with the individual players themselves, how to actually look at the differentiating characteristics of the players in the game, and have confidence that what you see in the game is reflective of how these players actually perform and differentiate themselves in real life. And lastly, I just wanted to give a couple of acknowledgements to the resources that helped me a lot along the way in making these players and getting to consume their content to help me get a better understanding of these players and their strengths and weaknesses. So a very special shout out to pages like Ben Pfeiffer, the team at No Ceilings, putting together all their big boards throughout the year, and obviously their podcasts and written content. Ordinary Scout on YouTube does great breakdowns. Derek Parker, obviously the GOAT when it comes to the individual player scouting reports this year. Sam Vecini, Bryce Simon at the Game Theory podcast. High Upside Hoops, great YouTube channel. Escapist on YouTube for the great footage that's out there. Dunked On for their scouting reports and how seeing the top prospects and how they'll translate to the NBA, and so many other resources that have helped me out along the way. I apologize if I missed you in that shout out. All of these people made my life a little bit easier and made this process easier and helped support what my eyes were seeing. And finally, thank all of you for supporting my draft class, supporting my offseason roster. Your support has been amazing so far. I hope to continue this in NBA 2K27, so be on the lookout. I hope to start my scouting as soon as I finish all of the second round players from the 2026 draft to get you guys ready for NBA 2K27. I am planning on dropping offseason roster update videos similar to this, so keep an eye out for those. But in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your summer, and I will catch you guys later.